Hi everyone, I'm Susan Birch and welcome to another episode of the Health Detective podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different. I'm talking to my friend Irina Castellano, who is an authorised foster carer, and today we're going to talk about the importance of foster care. I'm going to ask her a lot of questions. And the reason we're sharing this story is because it's so important, and I'm really looking forward to helping get this message out amongst people. So please don't just tune out because it's not about diet and nutrition and exercise. Please listen to what Irina has to say, and then perhaps share this with anybody who may find it helpful. Irina, thanks so much for coming on today. It's a real privilege to have you here.
Oh, Susan, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here, and thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. Look, you've been a foster carer to over 70 children. Mm-hmm. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about that, why you've got so involved and passionate about foster care?
Yeah, I would love to. I've actually had a very privileged childhood. So my dad was an engineer and we moved around a lot, and therefore I got to see it quite a bit. So I saw, poverty, and I saw children struggling a bit more than I did in my life. And I always thought, it would be good to help them. But it wasn't until I was 13 and I read the book, A Child Called It by Dave Pelzer, that I heard about foster care. I mean, I had never even heard about it. And in that book, it is a story of a child being, emotionally and physically abused by his biological mother and being singled out among the siblings. And I was absolutely, it really touched me to the core. And I thought, well, if ever I could help a child that needs a home. And after that book, he wrote another book when he was put into foster care, and he did not have necessarily great experiences there either. So I said, oh my gosh, how can foster carers, on top of everything that these kids have been through, sometimes also not be great? So I thought, no, if I ever grow up, I want to have my own kids. I want to adopt and also foster kids and help these kids. So it took me a while to find my prince. And then when I did, I forgot to mention it before we got married. But then once we were married, he traveled a lot. He traveled 200 days a year, really, and left me here once I moved out. I'm from Germany, so he's Australian. I came out here, and then pretty much within a week, he was traveling again. And I was looking through local papers, and everywhere it asked for foster carers. And I was like, oh, that's always what I wanted to do. And because of my visa status, being a spouse, I wasn't allowed to work. What a silly rule. But anyway, it was great because then I had the time. And over the phone, I told my husband about my idea, what we could do together. And he was like, really? But aren't we going to try and have our own kids? Yeah. But I always wanted to do that as well. And he said, okay, whatever keeps you happy, whatever keeps you busy, then, go for it. And so he was like most men, I think. It's mostly the women who come up with this idea. And he, said, all right, to please me. But once he got on board, he was just incredible. So he's been absolutely super loving and supportive. And for 22 years now, we've been fostering. And it started off with, a few kids before we then actually also went abroad again. Because after about a year here in Australia, he got a job in China. So we went to China. So we stopped there for a year, but then went to Singapore and also started fostering there. And that's where we actually adopted our first daughter, who was in foster care, not with us, but she needed a home. So we adopted her. So that's an international adoption. Then we fostered a few more kids and had our biological son. And then we came back here to Australia, continued fostering. And then another kid couldn't go back because, our aim is always to reunite the children back with their birth families. But this one also couldn't be reunited, so she stayed as well. So we also did a local adoption.
It's such a inspiring story, and I absolutely love your passion. And what you're doing now is you're helping foster parents or potential foster parents prepare for what's involved and understand their role and provide them with a lot of the tools they need to be successful, make it a successful transition to have the child come into their home, give them that support and unconditional love that they need, and give them some of the tools they need for when they leave your home and, you know, either go back to their own families or into a more permanent situation.
Yeah, and this all came about because, I mean, we've been doing there are 4 different types of care. So you can do the emergency care, which means that you get the kids pretty much on the night that they are removed, and they come, you know, within an hour or so. You got to be rather flexible to do that. So we've done emergency care. We've done then also restoration care, which means, you know, the time until they can be restored. And then also permanent care when kids cannot be restored. So which means that they stay until the age of 18. And then there's also respite care, where you can help out other foster carers by just giving them a weekend or a week, depending on if they have something on. That you get a beginning date and an end date, and you look after the kids for that period of time to give other foster carers a break for whatever reason that they need it. And for me, my thing is now that, you know, my kids we've now got 3 teenagers. One is doing HSC this year, another one next year. So I don't want to be so flexible and constantly having kids, you know, come and go and so on. And also because they're at high school, so I had more time suddenly to myself because they leave the house earlier and come back a bit later, and they, you know, they're more independent and do their thing. And then the big change came for me now that we actually are struggling to, I mean, we've always been short of foster carers, there is no doubt, but lately, we've actually also got problems in placing little ones between, you know, 0 to 5 years of age, which is normally the age group that, you know, the first ones to be taken into care. But we are now struggling, and we have kids sitting literally here in New South Wales in motel rooms with caseworkers, youth workers, and yeah, it's not ideal. These kids are often also in sibling groups, and we need to have homes to put them in so that they have a family environment, that they have a, you know, safe, loving home to come home to every day after school. So I don't want them sitting in motel rooms. And I think that's my biggest big push to now come up with something of saying, hey, where are all these foster carers that we need? And I would like to work with people who maybe aren't so sure and don't really know what it involves, but, you know, they just want to hear from a carer how it actually all works instead of the agency. I would like to work with agencies, so I'm not, you know, I'm just trying to give them more work to find the carers out there, but to work with, I don't know, maybe IVF clinics, and, you know, be contacted by the people that can't create families through IVF, or by empty nesters who have an empty house and empty rooms that they would love to fill again with kids, or people who have, you know, toddlers and would like to, you know, have another baby, and for whatever reason they can't, they can still have a sibling for their kids, or people who are saying, you know what, I want to help the older kids. I'm happy to take in a few teenagers. I mean, we always need those as well. So any age group is out there. I mean, you can literally pick and choose if male, female, age group, siblings, no siblings. I mean, it is, you know, unfortunately, the situation that we do have everything and anything out there that needs a home.
Well, I really love the way you always talk about this as, you know, creating love, you know, loving families. And, you know, I think it's so important, and it's, you know, quite inspiring to think that you could be that person that makes a difference in a child's life. And sometimes you hear such wonderful success stories of foster care. And I'm thinking of, in New Zealand, we have Philip Rhodes, who is an opera singer who's back in New Zealand, and he's going to be performing here over the next few months. but he was a child that went into foster care, an amazing family. And there's a wonderful documentary, if anybody's interested in watching it, on Māori TV, which is well worth watching. And, you know, it just made me, it made me cry, but it just shows you what can be achieved when you have really compassionate, you know, wonderful carers looking after displaced children.
Yeah, and there are not enough stories, the positive ones out there, in my opinion. You know, very often what really sells are the terrible stories and the neglect that, you know, kids even maybe had in foster care, or just so many, negative things that are attached to kids in foster care in general, you know, so just the stigma attached to it, instead of seeing the potential of these kids and just, looking at the fact that none of them asked to be in foster care, and that we can do so much to actually really even raise the positivity of foster care, you know, and also not to see it as something that, you know, just stigmatizes and judges the birth families. That, you know, everybody, I think COVID has shown how quickly people can, you know, go from a happy time to a really tough time.
Yeah.
And to just highlight that even mental health is a big issue out there in the community, and that we need to be there to support one another, to actually say, hey, you're having a time, just like we would do with friends, you know, that we say, okay, hey, you're struggling, bring over the kids, I'll look after them. But on a, you know, in a more official setting, in the sense that we also say birth families will give you the support, will guide you through it. And, you know, our whole aim is to give these kids back to birth families, because this is where they belong. But if for whatever reason it's not possible, then yeah, we want to make sure that these kids have a permanent home. So also a lot of people don't know that adoptions have been simplified, that there has been, you know, enough research now into the importance of permanency for these kids, and that we want to make sure that they know where they are until 18 and beyond, so that if there is a possibility to keep these kids in the same placement where they were in foster care, and it's all working well, then, you know, why would we rip them out of that again and then go into adoption department? So a lot of changes have been made. So nowadays, for example, we have over 50 foster agencies just here in New South Wales. But there are 5 now that actually also give you dual authorization. So which means that if you are happy to go down the fostering journey, but you also are happy to maybe increase your family, then you can already get dual authorization from the beginning. So you can say, I'm happy to foster, but I'm also, you know, if a child cannot be returned, I'm also happy to keep that child until the age of 18, and then, you know, obviously beyond. So those are a lot of changes that I think the public doesn't know about. There is just not enough awareness of how much you are supported also as a foster carer. So you're not in this on your own. You have support groups, you have training, you have a whole team that works together, because we always say, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, and you're not in this alone. You get 24-hour hotlines. So, you know, you are so supported as a carer. And yes, of course, you know, some agencies support better than others, or some caseworkers are better than others, but just like some foster carers are better than others. So it works in all areas. And if you have the right support around you, then you are very much supported. And if you have any questions, any doubts, then, you know, immediately you have a number that you can call and say, hey, I'm, you know, struggling with this, or what do I do here? And can you give me advice? And there will always be somebody on the other side and trying to guide you through it. So, you know, there's so much more now that we do for foster carers, and also in terms of permanency and adoption.
Because I suppose the question that comes to mind is that a lot of these children have been traumatized, they've had terrible experiences. They may not be used to living in a family environment, not necessarily a family environment where they're not loved, because I'm pretty sure most of the parents actually love their children. They may not have the skills and the ability to cope. And yeah. to cope with knowing how to look after them and bring them up properly, which is a whole nother topic, really.
But very often they didn't have good role models to begin with,
exactly.
you know. So I mean, we and I don't think any of us as parents are you know, perfect parents. I think we all have our moments. We all could have done better here and there. But it is, you know, does it get out of control? Is it, you know, is it unsafe? That's a different story. So if these birth families get more support to start with, which, you know, has also been changed and implemented, but, you know, it hasn't reached every corner yet. So definitely with more support, we shouldn't even be removing these kids. But if we need to remove because there is safety or, you know, alcohol or drugs or something that is definitely not in the child's best interest as an environment, then yeah, there needs to be enough home. We need enough homes that these kids immediately from there can go into safe homes, and then, you know, that everything else can be sorted and hopefully they can be restored.
So as a potential foster carer, you know, I suppose concerns would be, how disruptive is this going to be? What kind of behavioural problems will there be? How difficult is it to connect with these children and create a bond? And then the other question, I know the question for me would be falling in love with a child and then having to give the child up again. So yeah, can you just talk a bit about
there are a few good points you pointed out. I mean, one of the things, for example, when I tried to convince my husband to come on board, he was like, oh, but you know, I don't know if I could love somebody else's child like my own. And I said, okay, but let's give it a go, but because unless we try it, we really wouldn't know. And then we got our little daughter, and he was so in love with her, and he was, you know, he was like apple of, and still is the apple of his eye. And then I felt pregnant, and it was through IVF. So we've also had our journey there. Through IVF, we had our little boy. So I was pregnant, and I heard him say, but I don't know if I have any more love to give. I don't know if I don't know if I can love this one as much as the first one. And I was like, sweetie, let's just go with the flow and let's just see what happens. And, you know, it literally does not, for us, it did not matter and still doesn't matter if the kids have, you know, come biologically or not. There's no difference for us. Also doesn't matter if they look like us or not. Yeah, that's another story where, yeah, we really couldn't care less. They are who they are, and we just love them to bits. And there was always this saying that I've also got in one of the life story books for my child, for one of my children, is like, you might not have grown under my heart, but you have grown in it. You know, so that's exactly how I feel. So for me and for my husband, the connectedness is there. And of course, when kids first come into our care, you know, some of them, yes, they do have behavioral issues, and that's where we need to guide them on what is, you know, appropriate, what's not appropriate. I think the key thing that I've seen with pretty much all the kids coming into care, that either they're incredibly, as much as they're all different, there's certain patterns that you can see. So some of them are very withdrawn, very quiet, and those are fine, to be honest. The harder ones to open up and, you know, to gain the trust, so that they do trust you enough to share things and to talk openly. The ones that are, you know, sometimes even a little bit depends, but normally I find the ones that come with the emotional tantrums and the emotional outbursts, I find them in many ways, especially if they're smaller, you know, a bit easier, because you can see what goes on for them. So you can see that they're sad or they're unhappy or, you know, angry or whatever else. And then you try to, what they always say, and, you know, you do so much training over the years, is that you name the feeling and then you can tame it. So you need to name it to tame it. And if you see children that are losing it and they are all over the place because, you know, so much has been going on in their lives and they've never really learned to deal with their emotion and to give it a name and to have strategies, because this is really what we're doing as parents when we have our own kids, that, oh, you're sad, oh yeah, okay, you know, or you hurt yourself, oh my gosh, you know, let's clean this up, and so you're making a fuss, you're explaining what the child is kind of feeling, and they pick up on that. But if you've been left on your own and you're neglected and you are never really learning strategies, or you just see that, oh, somebody flips and then somebody hits, and oh, that's how I solve problems, so I also need to flip and I also need to hit because that's what I've been taught, then, you know, you're not getting anywhere. So when you start to teach these kids that, okay, I can see that you're angry, and, you know, don't take it out on somebody else. Here you have the sofa, the pillows, you hit the pillows, you get your energy out. But the next time you are angry, let's work on different strategies. So next time you're angry, I want you to right away go over there, punch the pillows, and then I want you to breathe. I want you to really calm yourself down, and then you come back. And when you teach them little strategies on, you know, I had the best example. We had 5 kids here at some point. So we had a sibling group, two kids and my 3 kids. And they always love to play on the trampoline. I mean, the trampoline is just one of the best outlets for energy. But then they played this game where one of the kids would be in the middle and they would have a ball. And, you know, you had to try and hit the child in the middle with the ball, and everybody took its turn. So the kids loved it, played for hours on this trampoline. But this one kid, every time he was in the middle, he loved being on the outside and throwing the ball. But every time he got put in the middle, he would lose it because he felt, you know, not at the good spot, and it wasn't great. So he would come out and he would be screaming, yelling, and we've got, thanks God, beautiful neighbors. And then I said, okay, if you don't want to play the game, that's, you know, the rules work for everybody. So if you don't, no, I want to play, but I said, okay, but then you need to play with the same rules as everybody else. And, you know, you would just lose it. But it took me a week because I thought, you know, I'm not going to stop everybody playing that game. He needs to adjust. But it took us a week, and it was beautiful to see, because he would come after the 5th day or the 6th day, he would come and he said, okay, I'm angry, but I want to play this game. So I'm going to push these pillows, I'm going to hit them. And then, okay, when I'm ready, I'm going to go back out. And, you know, after 6 days, it was no issue. He said, you know what? Now I start to enjoy the game. I got the message that it's not me being in the middle and being hit by a ball, and that's the issue here. It is the thing that, yeah, I feel that I'm part of this group now. And he could really articulate it. I mean, it took us a week to work on this, but then he was really like, he says, okay, it was, you know, I felt as if everybody was picking on me when I was in the middle, but I can now see that this is the game and this is the rules, and it goes for everybody. And it was really beautiful to see that he got the message, but he also learned that if he has a way of managing his emotions and learning to really name it and then to work with this, he then applied it in other areas. So if he ever felt, you know, upset or angry or hurt, then he would say, okay, I'm having these feelings again. It's, you know, coming up in my stomach, and I know I need to just go on the side. I'm going to just squeeze this pillow. I'm going to just, and then when I'm calm again, I'll come back. So he knew when to remove himself. He knew how to, you know, really learn to work through his emotions. And most of all for us to know when he was feeling this way, so that he could really name it. And then he could tame it through the strategies that we were giving him. And breathing, of course, is always a really important one. And for them to understand that just because, you know, that people got hit in the past doesn't make it right. And this is not what we do here. Or, you know, if kids come and, you know, my kids were up in arms when kids would come through the door, and then within a few moments when something didn't go their way, they would, you know, use the F word. And my kids were like, well, you know, how can he use it and we can't use it? Well, let's teach him our way of doing it. So, you know, you involve your children. This is another big part that I think that it has taught our children so much. So when they see kids struggling, or when they see them coming with, you know, just literally the clothes on their back, and, you know, my kids would like a different iPhone, and, you know, all the other issues that first world countries have, and, you know, how spoiled kids are nowadays in so many ways. It has really taught them compassion. It has shown, you know, how to use empathy. and to really see another person's perspective, to also know that, some of these kids had their parents in jail and they couldn't see the parents, or some of them didn't have a father in their lives, so there was no role modeling. And to really see what these kids go through compared to our generation of kids who would like a car when they turn 16 and all the other perks that they're getting, so yeah.
Well, that story literally brought tears to my eyes. It's so beautiful. And what you're really talking about, Irina, is the skills that all of us need to learn throughout childhood that we can take into adulthood, so that we can live our lives to our full potential and not be a victim and not be a slave to these emotions that we all feel and experience. So I think that's absolutely wonderful, really touches my heart. But, getting back to finding more people to do foster care, what kind of people make great foster carers?
People who have love to give, who are in this to actually help a child, and not just, I used to struggle with people coming into foster care to want to create a family. I was thinking, no, that's not what foster care is all about. Foster care is about, helping these kids and then reuniting them back with their birth family. But because quite a few kids cannot be returned, I have now, embraced, and, who am I to say anything after I adopted 2 kids from out of home care as well, but it was never my plan. It was never, even though at 13, I said, I would like to, I always thought that was like an adoption agency dealing with adoption, not adopting kids from out of home care. So for me, these were always totally separate things. But I can now see, of course, also the benefit of combining the two. But I would love for people to come into fostering and saying, hey, we want to help kids. And I mean, it's pretty much with a guarantee that if you stay long enough, there will be a child that cannot be restored. So if it is the first child, if it is the 5th child, if it is the 10th child, eventually there will be one that cannot go back. I mean, this is just, how the chances are. So if I can get people to come on board and, ask me any questions they might have, and just, that's why I created now, this 4-week program of just going through any possible questions that they could have from one week to another, and that I can, show them how a daily routine would look like, or what you do to prepare your house when a child comes into your care, all these things that might be, questions that other people have, like, how do I get started? What will the assessor ask if they come to the house? Or, how long does it all take? So all these questions that maybe, I don't know, I'm just wondering why we don't have enough carers, because you hear of all these people that are trying to have kids in their homes, and then we have all these kids that need homes. So I would just like to somehow match the two, because I just don't see any reason for families to be here in New South Wales or any other state in Australia or anywhere in the world really that would like to have kids in the home, and they're not matched with the right agencies, So, I mean, the agencies will decide if you're able to have the kids in their homes, and they do the matching, but at least for people to get started and to know whom to contact. And a lot of people don't know that we have over 50 agencies here in New South Wales, but everybody also, not all of them, but some of them do different things. Like some help kids with disabilities, some help teenagers, and some, prepare the babies that come up for adoption that won't even really go into the foster system per se. So it is, I just want to create the awareness, and anybody who has ever thought about it and thought, oh, is it the right time or not? I mean, when is it the right time to have a kid? You can always have excuses not to have children, not to fall pregnant now, or not to do this or that. And yes, I mean, with fostering, it could be that, within a certain time frame, you suddenly have a sibling group. So you're going from absolutely 0 to 2 or 3 at a time, because, we sometimes have sibling groups of 3, 5, 8, 11. I mean, we have big families, and who is going to take in a sibling group of 11? Pretty much nobody. So we need to then, if we can't find homes close together, we need to split them up, which is not ideal. So if you are open to having more than one child, brilliant. We're more than happy to give you a sibling group in one go. But that also means that, instead of having 9 months to prepare for this baby and so on, you're probably within a certain time frame, suddenly, the parent of 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids. So there needs to be support, and you need to just think about what are you capable of and what are you willing to do, how flexible are you. And I'm really happy to talk to people about this, what would be a good fit, or what would they really like out of fostering, but how it all just runs in general.
Well, we'll make sure we have all your contact details in the show notes so that people can email you and ask questions, and perhaps have a chat to you if they're interested.
That would be brilliant.
And I'm wondering about, don't quite know how to ask this question. Is it better if you've had a family and had children, or, how do people who haven't been able to have children, how does foster caring work for them with, because, even, having kids, whether they're your own or whatever, is jolly hard work. And, I was talking with a friend the other day, and we were laughing yesterday, and we both got 4 kids. We were having a good chuckle about our first child compared with our last child, and all the things we did and didn't do, and, just getting that experience.
Well, look, I think it can have benefits either way. It really depends on the couple and on where they're at, because I think it's wonderful if you already had kids and it hasn't put you off. You would like to still have more. I think that's a brilliant sign. And then again, you need to also understand that maybe certain practices that you did with your children might not work with kids in foster care, because you do need to look at the kids that come into your care from a trauma perspective. So really it should be trauma informed care practices, which means that you would have need to deal with these kids slightly different, which is also a challenge, that if you already have kids and they're still living at home, and you're now adding another mix of kids to this, that they can see, like I said before, that my kids were like, oh, but we can't do this, and you let them do that. It's you need to manage that as well, and you need to explain it. And I've always try to explain to my kids that, every house is different. And can you imagine what these kids go through, that from, one house where they were allowed to do all these things, suddenly they come into our house and, we're saying, no, there are boundaries, there are, guidelines, and this is what we do, and this is what we don't do, manners, that we have all these things that we would like for the kids to change, how challenging that must be for them as well. And especially if they've been maybe to 2, 3, 4, 5 other placements before they even come to us. I mean, what these kids go through each and every time, having to adapt to the house rules, having to adapt what's possible, what's not possible, to see what they can and can't do in one house. So it has its plus points that, somebody has already a bit of experience, definitely, and that still wants to have more kids, because you also know what it means to keep kids safe in terms of, putting, I don't know, the protectors onto the, electrical plugs and all these things that you know already because you've raised your own kids. And then having people who have never had kids, and then to go from having none to maybe suddenly 2 kids in one go. Of course, that is a challenge. And then again, if people are open and willing to learn, that's all we want. We want people to say, oops, I've never had this scenario. What do I do here? And to ask questions, to say, all right, whatever training you have, I'll attend it. I think I can learn something from the other carers attending. I can learn from the facilitator. I can learn from the resources and content and things that I'm given. If there's a willingness to learn, I've learned so much over the last 20 years. I do every single training session that I can possibly do. I've even done a diploma in community services to learn more about all of this. I've done trauma-informed care training. I now actually even teach trauma informed care practices or the diploma in community services. And yeah, it's definitely broadened my horizon in so many ways. And I'm a different carer than what I would have done and how I would have cared 20 years ago, that's for sure. And actually it just reminded me also that you touched earlier, which I forgot to answer now, of letting go.
Yes.
I don't think that it gets any easier. So having let go of quite a few kids, and yes, I mean, as much as we would like to think that a teacher in the classroom doesn't have any favorites. Of course, with some kids you connect even more than maybe with others, depending on also how long they stayed and how much time you actually had to interact with them. And yeah, I mean, one little girl came to us at 1 week old and stayed with us for 13 months. And it was super hard to let go, super, super hard. But we're actually very, very lucky because we also have still really good contact with the family and we see them regularly. So that is a plus point, but it's not normally the case. So we are very blessed that we can still have her in our lives and vice versa. So they're really accepting us as their extended family. And that, that has helped tremendously, especially also because every child took it differently. My husband grieved differently from me. So for me, my whole routine was suddenly different. No baby, it's like, where before you were thinking about the afternoon nap and the mesh puree you were doing, or, so many things that were part of your daily routine. And then from one day to the next, boom, it's gone. So these are definitely big changes too. And after that, child left, we took a bit of a break. So we took a few months off and we said, no, we're not ready yet. And we all had to, grieve and do it in our own little way and connect as a family again, like to really see that everybody was back on board to say, yep, all right, we are ready to foster again. That took a time. So it's not easy and it doesn't get any easier. Just because we've been doing it for 22 years doesn't mean that, when a child goes, it's that much easier. No. But I think also it has, it was also hard for my kids to learn that, whoops, somebody's here and then next thing they're gone again. But I've always tried to show them how much good they've done in that time and how much this child has learned. I would always say, remember when they first came and that was, their little issue, and look how at the end that wasn't an issue anymore, or how they gained confidence, how, they were so much better even with their schoolwork, or, you could really see the improvements. And then the kids were always like, yeah, okay, all right, so we're trying to always highlight what we did for that child in that time that they were here, and that, we gave it our best shot, and that's all you can do. So yeah, the letting go is not an easy one. And then again, that's the whole purpose of fostering. So kids should be reunited if at all possible. And if they're not reunited with birth family per se, but they can go to an auntie, an uncle, a grandma, then that's a success story too, because at least they're staying within their culture, within their families, and they can have a good sense of identity, because this is where you want to support them as well. So there's different areas we need to really, and anyway, as a foster carer, we don't really have a say in it. That's all done by the court and by people who don't have emotions attached to it. So it is one of those things where, you just trust the system and you hope it's all the right choices, and you can do so much for these kids in the time that they are with you. But then it's up to everybody else to make sure that they are reunited and then supported as well.
We often read horror stories about kids going in and out of care, and into so many different homes, and not necessarily that the homes haven't been good, loving homes, but I was recently reading about a little boy who'd been into like 25 homes over the course of his little 4 or 5-year-old life. How does that happen? Why does that happen? As a foster carer, if you'd had a child, you get the option of having that child back again if they need to go back into care.
Yeah, well, if at all possible, then yes, that's what they would look at. If the placement was going well and the child comes back into care, then of course the biggest common sense would be to put that child back into the same care where he or she was. Now, it's not always possible because, again, we're short of carers. So if new children have been placed with that foster care and they don't have the capacity to take in that child again, that would be a scenario where it doesn't work. And also, kids move on for different reasons. And it's not because, they're such naughty and terrible kids, therefore they need to go on to the next placement. It's really for different reasons that carers don't continue fostering, for example. I mean, if you have a child in your care, but then God forbid something happens to your parents or your mother, and you don't have the capacity to now look after more children or the same children, and you're now looking after your elderly parents, that would be a scenario. Or, for example, if you move, some people, get posted somewhere else and they move, and they need to keep the kids here for that reason, that it can have contact visit with birth family, and so for so many other reasons, maybe they can't get the child to come with them. Then the child needs to go to another placement. Sometimes, unfortunately, also if that person is then pregnant and says, and has a maybe difficult pregnancy and is also not capable of looking after the other child, then so there's all different reasons why kids move on, and it's not necessarily to do with their behavior or because anything like that, which people often think. Because if you hear a kid has been in 10 placements, then you think, oh my God, it must be a terrible kid, but it's not the scenario. So you have probably a minority of kids that also then get moved on because of their behavior, but it doesn't always have to be that reason at all.
And what about children, going back to the family, and then it, sort of becomes a bit dysfunctional again, and then they're back in care again? Is that common? I mean, I suppose it's hard to pinpoint really, but.
Yeah, well, and I think there's not enough research yet done with the changes that have been made, that, children do stay up to 2 years in care before it is completely decided. I mean, sure, some kids get restored after 6 months or 8 months when everything has settled. But a lot of kids now stay up to 2 years in care before it is being decided if they can go back, in order to really make sure that parents don't just, pretend that everything is hunky-dory, but that they, 2 years is a long time, because 2 years means they still need to show up for contact visit. They need to constantly prove that, they are not on drugs, they're not using alcohol, they're not, anything like that. So 2 years is a long time. And that's why that has changed. But because that was only recently changed, there wouldn't be enough to show now if that has made an effect in the terms of, kids being restored and then ending back up in care. Unfortunately, there's still, a higher percentage of kids coming back, but with this new change, it wouldn't be time enough yet to see if that has, successfully.
And do you know anything about New Zealand foster care at all? Or do you know, are we on the same sort of guidelines as you, or we have our own completely own?
No, I wouldn't know enough about that. No, I know that there are big changes also and differences within states here in Australia. But, in general, I would like to say that fostering, is in most countries, not in all countries, but in most countries, and that there is a need everywhere to get these kids. I mean, some countries have orphanages. Australia doesn't have any orphanages. So that already in itself brings, the next layer. So as much as it's great to put kids into foster care rather than, into families rather than homes, if there are no homes, then what do you do? And that's where we're at now as well, that, they're sitting in motel rooms. So when I first told my kids about this, they were like, oh my God, they're in the hotels and with the pool and so on. I'm like, no, no, it's not the hotels that we go through. we go to during holidays. It's, motels. It's places where they are just waiting to find a family and sitting there, with people that take different shifts and looking after them. So it's not ideal. No. We would like to have kids in family homes where they have a permanent bed, where they can, decorate their room, where they can, go to school and come home to a family that is, sitting together around the table to eat. And, it's different. So that's what I'm looking for, to find more people who are willing to do that. And it would be the same in New Zealand. I would think that,
yeah,
there's a need as well.
And I was just thinking, with this 2-year sort of plan being implemented in New South Wales, are the homes and the family, the birth homes, are they going through some of the kinds of training that you're giving to the foster parents about managing their children and, teaching some of these skills and techniques, and also learning about how to manage their own emotions and what to do if they're flipping out, and so they can flip out safely and the children can still be protected? Is that part of this process?
Yeah, so in order to be authorized here in Australia, you need to do a 2-day workshop. And, without that 2-day workshop, you don't really process to getting an assessor to come to your house. So this is really where, before it used to be in different, like we might have had the assessor come in first and then do the training, and then people realize, oh, maybe it's not for me, or so the training is now done first. So 2 days training people go through, where we tell them a lot about, why kids come into care, what types of care they are, what we expect of foster carers. And also we give them case studies, so case scenarios, and, this is what the scenario is, this is how often the child has contact, this and that. So we work through that to show people, the other side of it, on why birth families get the kids removed, what these emotions for these kids might be that they're going through, and all of that. But you can only do so much in 2 days. So once they are actually then going through the assessment process, then they get authorized, then they get placed with the child, or even before they get placed with the child, they can already access training. So we have organizations that actually provide online training, that do face-to-face training. We provide resources. So there's a lot out there. So the more you actually want to learn, the more information you will get. And you need to just decide if you do it online by yourself, or if you want to hear it in a group and attend face to face. There's a lot out there. I mean, I've literally done hundreds of training sessions now over the last 20 years, because I always look for anything and everything. So we have courses on autism, we have courses on depression, anxiety, we have courses on self-care, on life story work, on how do you try and put the pieces of the puzzle of the child together in maybe a book, or in like a scrapbook, or how do you do it to find out more about a child's culture, all about culture and identity. How do you support teenagers that are now maybe struggling even more with culture and identity, because it was all starting to now sink in that, hey, where is dad, or where is this and that. So there's a lot of courses that we have to support them. So there's only so much you can do in 2 days. And then after that, you get regular schedules sent out, and you just pick and choose what you're interested in, what works with the age group that you have, and what you think that you maybe have, still a gap, or what you want to learn. And some of them are then on behavioral strategies, on emotional regulation, on, FASD, for example, if babies were, impacted by alcohol in utero, all kinds of courses.
And then sending them back to families. Over this 2-year period, are the families given training as well? Do the families have to prove that they can now cope?
Yeah, they need to have made significant changes, and they would have somebody, that is working with them, and checking in with them on a regular basis. And they also have chats before and after contact visits. So of course we want the kids to remain in contact with them as well. So, depending on how the age of the child and the circumstances, but the child would see the birth family regularly outside your home. So that's not in your home or anything. So that would be through, either supervised or unsupervised, depending on the situation, that these kids would see their birth family.
Well, I feel like I want to say you are an angel. I mean, this is
Oh, there's so many people out there who do it, but I know that there are so many more who could do it too, and just really get the feeling of helping these kids and seeing, yeah, tremendous change.
Or it just really tugs at your heartstrings, doesn't it? And so what about older people doing foster care? Is that an option, or is that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I used to run a kinship and support group a few years ago. And I mean, being a kinship carer brings another dimension. So if you are related to the child, so those, and then also I had a lot of grandparents doing it. And then I had, I think the eldest one I had in my group was 87 and she was still going. And she had done it for also, I think, 40 years. She was my little idol. And she used to do the babies. So she said, I'm so old now that I don't need much sleep. And I don't mind taking all the babies, and then she would settle them and get them into a routine, and then they would go to a foster family or to an adoptive family.
Wow.
So, yeah, I think she was, out of the ordinary, and it's not, I'm not saying now that when you're 87 you can come and be authorized. I think there is a limit, but when you get started, you can pretty much do it all your life if you're fit and you are able to continue. And yeah, if you're keen to make it work, then we need you. So whoever's, and I'm more than happy to share, the ebook chapter that I've written recently on fostering and adoption. I would love for your readers or for your listeners to read it, and I'm happy to share that with you.
What's the best way to get that ebook shared? Is there a link that we could share in the show notes so people could download it, or would they need to contact you directly?
Yeah, they would need to contact me. It is because I don't really have a link. I just have the ebook. So I'm more than happy if they either look me up through LinkedIn. My website is supposed to be getting done now in the next month or so, but it's not up and running yet because, it's all fairly new. I've just written the chapter and I've just thought of this, 4-week course that maybe I could give to people so that they can decide if fostering is for them. And if this, podcast just gets them interested and they contact an agency close to them, that's all I want. I just want people to, have a think about it, and not to think too much, just to get going, get started, and give a child a home that's in need of a home.
Well, I'll just ask again that everyone who listens to this, if you could just take a few moments to share this, share it on your social media, share it with friends and family. It would be absolutely wonderful, compassionate thing to do.
And that would be brilliant.
I'll make sure we put all your contact details in the show notes and your email address. And well, thank you again for your work. It touches my heart whenever you and I, when we speak and, we talk about this. It's so important. And that's why I thought it would be, absolutely worthwhile having you on and having a conversation.
Thank you. I'm absolutely thrilled to have had this opportunity. And I thank you for just for people to think about it. And if they ever then hear, a sister-in-law who's, wanting kids, or a niece, nephew. I mean, there's so many people out there that, when you start talking to people, they're like, oh, never thought of it. And that's what I want. I just want people to think about it and to just give it a go.
And get the conversation going. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Susan. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you.